role is without putting such a definitive label on it. Because I feel like I kind of knew to a certain extent last year before like Carrington kind of took on more of the definitive and like I would be giving speeches, but I feel like for a combination of different reasons, I just feel less confident in my public speaking abilities, and I'm kind of like, I'm taking the back seat. And then I learned, I actually like being smart, I love even if I'm not always like on my P's and Q's, I need more fragile. I feel like that's something I genuinely love. Right, and I feel like it all comes back to that central message of like, you do what you can, and that's the best you can.
I've been looking for ideas, but also like trying to find a organizing position around less structured, like mumblings around it. So I'm trying to make that happen.
Just organic relationships, you know, I think is where
There's a lot to do where
No, remember companies
trying to get
debate white voting?
like dinner with everybody, and I want to get part of how
We went to a
You didn't go?
Sorry, Annalise wasn't there.
I wasn't there.
Oh.
I love how you just slot me in there. That's exciting. I'm such an integral part of it as well.
No, but you definitely did have FOMO though.
Hey, peace y'all. We gotta go ahead and get started. Yeah, how's everybody doing today? Y'all doing good? Yeah. Peace, my name is Presence. I'm a member of Black Alliance of Peace. I'm the Town Hall Coordinator, and I'll be moderating this Town Hall today. Again, thank y'all all for coming out. This is the second Town Hall in our series this quarter. So this Town Hall is titled Collaborative Resistance in Defense of Our Communities. We decided to really shift gears this year and focus on really developing our community defense coalition, as we have seen that while Baltimore City has been touting that crime has been going down, the violence we've seen done to our community has been only increasing. Just recently, last month, we saw Dwayne Hawkins killed by Baltimore City Police by the same police officer that killed B.J. Abdullah, the A-rapper. So we see that not only are we still being, continuing to face violence in this city, the same people who commit the violence are not held accountable. But understanding that we live in a system of internal colonialism, meaning that we are subjugated people in Baltimore City, we understand that this system is not meant to keep us safe. We understand from the food conditions that we see in the food deserts. We see from the health care that Africans in Baltimore City suffer from the highest rates of diseases, from heart disease. Baltimore City has one of the highest rates of dementia in the country. Understanding that we still face the same conditions of segregation, we still face the same conditions of violence, it's important to understand that this system is not meant to correct itself. This is how the system is meant to operate. So in order to keep us safe, we have to be the ones to organize and come together to make that happen. Unless we come together, not just as individuals, but organizations. We understand that it's so many organizations in the city doing the work to build, to protect us, and to address some of these things that aren't being mentioned. So I'm really excited to have us come together. Last time, we really took the time to dive into what it means to develop a self-defense coalition, and what does it mean, and what are some things in meaning it. What I'm trying to say is, what does it mean to be safe? So I just want to get started with my first question for the audience, which is, what does it mean for a community to defend itself?
I think a lot of people hear the term community defense and they immediately put some kind of fighting connotation on it, and I think that's what a lot of people want to do when they get plugged into this, is fight. But actually talking to the most marginalized of us, the people that have been dealing with the fight for the longest time, they are in need of food, they are in need of mutual aid, and it is not enough to just go out and actively combat ICE agents or Baltimore Police Department in the physical ways, in the ways that might actually entertain like aggression instead. It needs to be heavily balanced with community care tactics, getting people who are actually in danger, food, water, shelter, necessities like that.
Thank you. Any other thoughts on that, yo?
On top of that, I'd say being organized, or having enough organizations that have leverage to have an impact on the issues, right? Because otherwise, like, we're talking to each other, we're complaining, but we're not actually able to be effective, right? So being organized in such a way that people see value in joining an organization because it's effective, and they see value in coming together to recognize their own collective power.
Yeah, thank you.
Peace, everyone. I think something that I kind of want to, it's not, I mean, this is not an original thought, but also thinking about community defense as, and going back to what the comrade said, like, we are thinking of ways to build the capacity of the movement. And also that starts at meeting people's needs. And also in meeting people's needs, they are coming to consciousness of the ways that the system does not serve them.
Yeah.
So building that community self-defense means also this process of coming to consciousness and saying, oh, the system does not serve me. So if the system cannot meet my needs in terms of food, that also means that the system cannot physically protect me.
Yeah.
So thinking of ways to, and then eventually getting to the fighting stage. Yeah.
Yeah, if there's not any other responses to that, I'll give mine. So thinking about what it means for a community to defend itself, first of all, the community must address what is the harm in the community. What is it that we need to defend ourselves against? Another thing is, what is our community? You know, my comrade, especially Erica, she always pins it out, like, what does it mean to be in a community? So I think it's important for us to be able to acknowledge and address, like, who is in our locality, who are the people that we are talking about when we're talking about defending each other. So I think it's important to be able to, you know, develop and strategize around that and really think about, you know, how can we make this a consistent practice? How can we really develop this in a way that we can see if we are actually defending each other?
Yeah.
Is violence actually going down? Is our health, is our conditions actually being addressed in the way that we want to see it addressed? Are the people that are really going through the violence, are they able to say, as we are defending ourselves, that I feel more protected? Not just say that and feel that, but materially say that I can say that I'm safer now.
Yeah.
So that's why we really are taking that time to organize, because we're not just saying this to talking points. You know, we're saying this because this is what we really need. So, you know, we're gonna go ahead and start it. We got a really good panel today that's going to help us understand a lot about what does it look like to defend the community. So we have, on my left, we have Alex from Pan-African Community Action. And then on my furthest left, we have Devon from Black Alliance for Peace. So we're gonna get started, and Pan-African Community Action is a community organization with the goal of building community power in DC. So if you wanna get started, you're good to go.
All right, peace everybody. Thank you for having Paco on this panel discussion. I'm here to represent Pan-African Community Action. We are a community, a grassroots organization in Southeast DC. We've been organizing for community-based power for the past 10 years. And how that looks is through realizing programs, realizing campaigns that involve direct community participation. And through direct community participation, we organize our community and we prepare our community to control institutions, not only control institutions, but build institutions and control the resources that directly shape our lives. So today I'll be highlighting one of our most recent programs, which is the People's Pan-African Wellness Front. And the People's Pan-African Wellness Front, we just launched it February. It is open once a month on the fourth Sunday of every month. And it is a place where not only we are trying to meet people's needs that have been neglected. If folks don't know, Southeast DC is the most neglected neighborhood of Washington, DC. It is a neighborhood consisting of about 90% Africans. These folks, it is considered a food desert as well. And these are folks who are just struggling to, who are not getting their most basic needs met. And so that's where PACA comes in, right? We're trying to meet those needs, but also show the community that we can meet those needs through community organization. We do not need to rely on individuals in power. We do not need to necessarily vote our way into meeting those needs. We're not saying that voting is bad, that you shouldn't vote. But in order for long-term sustainability, this is the path. This is how we realize that. And so the People's Pan-African Wellness Front is a place where we offer free blood pressure testing, free glucose testing. We have revolutionary healthcare information. We have supplies distribution. We have food. And there's also just a place where people can come together and share ideas, right? And build off one another, right? And so it is through the People's Pan-African Wellness Front that we are realizing a physical manifestation of organization. And it is through, programs like that that people can literally see what organizing looks like, what we have the power to build as a collective. We talk about it a lot in theory, through other programs like our Assata Shakur study group. But People's Pan-African Wellness Front is, how does that look materially? And it is through community participation, through people coming together and organizing for ourselves, to build power for ourselves. That is how we see a future where all of our basic needs are being met. Everyone is being included in terms of how resources are being distributed and shared. And then that we have the control over these institutions, not just the influence, not just representation, but direct participatory control.
Yeah, thank you for that, Alex. And as you can see, some of the examples that Alex mentioned in PACA are some real material, analysis of what's going on. So as you can see, that one of the ways that they are addressing some of the violence done to the community is through giving resources such as food, such as measuring blood and glucose. That's a lot of things that a lot of people aren't getting. We understand, especially thinking about the neglect in the medical care system to Africans. We understand, like, if in Baltimore City, Johns Hopkins is known for all the mental and healthcare damage that they've done to the Black community. A lot of us don't want to go to the doctor. A lot of us are afraid. So even being able to get that political education around, things that have to do related to our health is so important when we understand that Black people are at the forefront of health diseases, like was mentioned earlier. So thank you for mentioning that. I appreciate the work that y'all doing. So my next speaker that we have is going to be Devon from Black Alliance for Peace.
Peace, y'all. I'm Devon. I'm a member, Citywide Alliance member of BAP Baltimore. And so Black Alliance for Peace, just real quick, is an anti-war, anti-imperialist organization. It's national. Baltimore is just one of many citywide alliances throughout the nation. And I am humbly one of the co-coordinators of the Sophia Bakari Political Education Committee. And so before I provide additional context, I do want to read a petition that we did release back in the end of July, and then just add some context to it since July. And so our petition, called Demilitarize Baltimore, it says, while Mayor Brandon Scott celebrates declining homicide rates, the Baltimore Police Department, BPD, has murdered 3 Black residents in just 2 weeks, exposing Baltimore City's reliance on militarized policing, the lack of value of Black and working class lives, and the colonial relationship where the police are the occupation force tasked with the responsibility to control and contain the surplus, colonized populations into zones of non-being. These killings, execution-style shootings, ambush responses, and violent encounters with people in crisis reflect the deadly exchange programs that train Baltimore officers in tactics imported from Israel and U.S. war zones. Mayor Scott's praise of progress rings hollow while Black Baltimoreans are hunted by the same police force the DOJ condemned for racial discrimination. Now serving his second term as mayor, Scott's focus on reducing crime and praise of progress rings hollow while Baltimore City policing, including ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, continues to terrorize Black and working class residents. From no-knock raids to shootings of unarmed civilians, these murders follow a clear pattern. Police escalate, then execute. The victims, BJ, Ms. Clark Brooks, and Mr. Melton Jr. were denied their human right to live just as their families are now being denied justice. Although the Trump administration ended all consent decrees in May 2025, the 2017 consent decree imposed on Baltimore City following a DOJ report that confirmed systemic police abuse has done nothing to stop police terror. Instead, the city has expanded police budgets, proposed a $330 million Cop City training facility, and installed an underfunded, overworked crisis response system, all while ignoring demands for real accountability. The crisis of the unchecked militarized police forces that occupy Baltimore City is a credible threat to the safety and well-being of all Black Baltimoreans. The bloodshed will continue as long as police answer to politicians instead of the people. Without community control over the police, the only path to dismantling Baltimore's machinery of state violence, the city's progress is a myth written in blood. The people in Baltimore must break free from the political duopoly to build safe, self-determined communities. Decades of reform have only brought more state violence, masked by empty consent decrees and hollow boasts of low crime from officials. BAP Baltimore demands, 1, terminate the deadly exchange program in partnerships with the racist, fascist Israeli occupation forces. For those, if you do not know, the deadly exchange program is an opportunity for our law enforcement agents to exchange and collaborate in tactics with the Israeli occupation forces. And we do have some agents here in the city and the county department who have participated in the program. And some even going as far to say that some of the tactics that they learned were unlawful, which should not be surprising to any of us considering what they do is unlawful in general, but they were making those comments as well about what they were learning. Number 2, in the 1033 program and all militarized terror forces in our communities, the 1033 program providing military-grade weaponry to state, city, and school law enforcement departments. In Baltimore City, we have, besides the Baltimore City Police Department, we also have Morgan State and Coppin State who own military-grade weaponry. They are college campuses. They are historically Black universities. No college should be having military-grade weaponry when they are in service of students. So keep that in mind as well. And then number 3, in Operation Relentless Pursuit, in all city, state, and national police and intelligence agencies, partnerships, Operation Relentless Pursuit, providing additional funding for 7 cities that were deemed dangerous and violent, Baltimore being one of them. And we know that not only does the city police department, but also the school police departments continuously have an increase in funding, while services that benefit the people either become stagnant or removed entirely from budgets. And then lastly, number 4, no Cop City or any police expansion. So the Cop City mentioned in that statement, $330 million on Coppin State's campus. And what's particularly interesting, at least to me, as a member who has been canvassing in that immediate area with other comrades, a lot of folks are unaware that this is being developed. Alumni from Coppin State are unaware that these decisions are being considered. And if you read the document about the proposal, there's a lot of talk about community involvement and community engagement. However, none of the stakeholders were anyone from the community. And so that is also alarming as well. Since this statement in July, we heard from presence stating a couple of things that have transpired. Last month, within 1 week, 1 in the city, 1 in the county, 2 Africans were murdered by the police. And then on top of that, 95% of these police-involved murders, the cops are walking away scotch-free. So the question oftentimes is, how do we feel because the police is constantly being part of the problem that we're experiencing, part of the harm that we're experiencing, how can we feel that they are ever going to be the solution? And then I know very recently, I want to say around December, November last year, the only independent review, civilian review board that existed after years of being defanged and seemingly useless has now just been dissolved entirely. And so the only way that police can really be held accountable at this point is through the city council, which has shown us that they're not on our side. And on top of that, it's based off of whatever the police is providing. And so we cannot rely on the people committing the violence to then investigate the violence. And so that's also a concern for us as well. And so many different things are happening. We have that $1 billion jail that's also being established here in Maryland, that's being marketed as a therapeutic facility, as a drug facility, as a hospital, and a mental health facility. But it's just an excuse to jail all of us and force us to be labor slaves without the pay as well. And so all of these things are taking place since the statement has been released. And so we could add even more to the statement if we wanted, but regardless of adding more or taking things away, the point is that these systems are continuing to impact us, continuing to enact violence on us. I love that I heard from some of our folks in the audience talking about the violence. Violence is not just physical. We experience the violence through the food deserts. We experience the violence through the lack of mental health facility and care, or just health care in general. We experience the violence by being displaced intentionally so that these cop cities can be established. And so all of these things are taking place to defang us, make us useless in the eyes of them. But what I appreciate about being part of Black Alliance for Peace is that on top of having these events like this town hall, we're also doing these canvassing efforts, going into the community and speaking to folks who are unaware that all of this is taking place, because reality is we're all trying to survive, and so when you're trying to survive, you tend to not pay attention to what's happening around you. And so we are providing this opportunity to folks in the community who are not engaging in any maybe media that is going to provide them that information with that information. And so, it is important while we have organizations like PACA who are really meeting those needs, and other organizations as well within the DMV area, that there's also that additional step of informing the masses so that we can raise their consciousness, as Elon mentioned as well. And so those are a couple of things that Black Alliance for Peace have done. We also have a teach-in that's coming up that's also tied to that. So we have the Under Siege Militarization of Schools on April 4th that's directly related to how schools are being militarized. And then we also are also just trying to find ways to make sure that our community members are understanding on how the geopolitical world is also directly tied to what we experience. And so we have a screening on Monday called For the Revolution Will Not Be Televised film screening about making a connection between the regime change coup attempt of Hugo Chavez in 2002 to this regime change coup attempt kidnapping of Nicolas Maduro that we've all witnessed as well. And just making sure that we understand that all of this is connected to what we're experiencing, all the same struggle, the same enemy, the same person, the same state, the same empire that is behind all of the pain that we are struggling against. And so I do appreciate that as well in terms of what Black Alliance Peace has been offering. So if you have not signed that petition, and me reading it was the first time, definitely take a time before you leave to maybe re-engage with us about that and sign it, because we are looking for folks who are interested in wanting to be part of the solution that is not just about the physical defense, but that material defense as well. How can we prove to ourselves prove to one another that we are what we need? And I'll just leave off with, I wish I got the specific name, but I know this morning I came across an Afro-Venezuelan community. There's a video about an Afro-Venezuelan community that there's like 5,000 of these communities that are really engaged in how does a socialist development look like within their communities, and everyone being part of those conversations, being part of what's needed. With the community in the video, they noticed in there that there was a big need for school uniforms, and so the community decided, and they had a lot of members in the community who are very skilled with sewing and textile skills, and so they established a sewing facility so that they could then create the clothing for those communities and have the state pay for these uniforms or these shirts, whatever they need, so that then they can have what they need. And so things like that I think are very important. Those are the kind of conversations that we should be having and thinking about what can we do right now for each other. And so beyond that theory, but also in practice as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that presentation. It was really good. Yeah, some things that came up when you were talking, thinking about how you mentioned how, the police, they're not gonna prosecute themselves, and to add on to that, thinking about how, we have such a large Democrat climate, and then thinking about how, Brandon Mayor Scott has really been pushing this idea that Baltimore City has really been getting safer, but safer for who? Right. Thinking about, I also appreciate how you mentioned how the ways that we are connected to the global struggle, thinking about how we have the Deadly Exchange program in which we are training with the Israeli, in which Baltimore City Police are training with those committing the genocide in Israel right now, bringing those same tactics home. A lot of the things that we see in the city, such as the city watch cameras, come directly from Israel. The same way that police be sitting on the block all night long with their lights on, that comes directly from Israel in order to intimidate us. So when you break through the facade that has been really created by the Democratic Party, you can continue to see that we are subjugated people in this city. Yeah. But thank you for your presentation. We will now move on to the questions for the panelists. And I just want to get started with our first question, which is, who in our society are the most impacted by violence from the state?
I mean, I think, working class Africans, historically, since the inception of this country, Africans have been targeted by state violence. There's no doubt about that. We see it now in different forms because, you spoke about the fact of, domestic colony, the fact that, Africans are domestic colony in the US. But now it's a little more different because it's a neocolonialism in a sense that you have Africans in higher positions, you have Africans in these leadership positions, but they are serving the same institutions that's been, inflicting violence upon, not even just Africans, but upon working class folks, for the last 400 years, And so we need to understand that, this system, it cannot be reformed. It's going to keep on inflicting violence upon, our most impacted groups. And that's why we need to organize around these groups, that is where the realization of revolution comes from. Is only through the mobilization, the organization of the most impacted, which are the African communities.
I would really, anyone who is not working directly with the state. So I definitely agree with just working class African people. That's what our statement even is emphasizing on. But I'm looking out in this crowd, we're not all African. But that does not mean because you're not African, you're no longer a target for the state. We witnessed ICE kill 2 white people. And so we understand that it's really anyone who is in opposition to the state. And you can put yourself in that position in any way. It can be simply because of geographically where you were born and raised, and the conditions of, of your life have put you there. It could be because you were going to a protest to protest ICE or protest a murder that just happened, a police-involved murder. And so it really can be truly anyone who is not directly in favor and supporting the state. And that oftentimes is a lot of people that I engage with day to day. It's oftentimes the people that I see on the bus. It's oftentimes the people that I see working in the grocery store. It's the people that I work with in the schools. Whether they think they are, they are going to be directly impacted first and primarily when things continue to be risen. And so that's what I'm thinking of with that question.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank y'all for your responses. Just thinking about that question as well, I'll just add a little bit onto that. I just read a lot of works by Angela Davis, and she mentions how, especially within working class Africans, we must think about the intersectionality of that, thinking about the struggles that our Black women go through, reflecting on, even if you think about the homeless population, Africans, especially African women, make up a majority of that population. Thinking about, how, poverty, is compounded, especially with those having children. And I'm also thinking about how the homeless, specifically, deal with so much violence from the state. Those who are addicted to drugs. I remember when 28 people had overdosed over the summer, the response from the city was to arrest them, not give them treatment, to lock them up. That was the response that they chose to do. So that's just something I wanted to add on to that. But for my second question for the panelists, given the narrative surrounding violence and crime in Baltimore, what are some of the roles of community members in rejecting that propaganda and defending communities holistically?
This is something that I'm even trying to personally improve on myself, but to really fight against that propaganda is like really just constantly speaking about the things that are happening, especially as an organizer, like speaking to those around me, especially when they bring up something that I know is incorrect or has been formed as a result of this US-led propaganda. Truly is just combating that in that moment and providing those resources. Because we have that information, then it's also important for us to impart that information onto others so that they're also demystified. And so I think that role is, if you know, say something. That's the main role to me.
I definitely agree with that. I think that the U.S. propaganda machine is well-oiled. It works 24/7 all the time, and so to have these spaces where we're talking about these ideas and speaking about them, obviously you need independent study, you need collective study, but also I just want to highlight what my comrades said over there at the beginning of this, but building programs, building campaigns, so we're not just talking about this stuff, we need to be participating, physically participating in it. It's only then that people can actually, understand what we're talking about when we say community control, or what we're talking about when we say we need power. Once people are actually involving themselves in this kind of stuff, then it becomes realized. Then, all the dots start getting connected, and it's like, okay, this is real. This can be a realistic outcome. We don't need to rely on these kind of institutions anymore. We can do this ourselves.
Yeah, thank y'all for that. And just to get on to my last question, what are some examples throughout history we have seen of community defense? We know this is not a new concept, and that, throughout history, especially Africans have been organizing.
I mean, I always, my mind always flashes, Black Panther Party, the way that, Huey got started, was by neighborhood patrol, and, walking around, the streets of Oakland. But as Paca follows in the footsteps of the Black Panther Party, of this legacy of communities, organizations that are rooted in the Black radical tradition, and so the People's Pan-African Wellness Front mirrors the People's Free Wellness, the People's Free clinics that they had. We also look to our comrades overseas. We look to Cuba. We look to how they run their socialist healthcare system, how they export doctors and soldiers all over the world, whether it's Congo, whether Angola, whether it's, throughout Latin America, and so this is how these communities in the past have defended it against themselves, and it is through building, through solidarity specifically, that's why we understand, ourselves to be an internal colony, because our conditions mirror that of the colonized countries across the world.
Yeah, definitely agree with those examples. And like all of those examples have provided, so if you think about the Black Panther Party providing a lot of social services for their immediate community. We think about the Black Liberation Army presenting a physical defense, showing that, armed and dangerous and willing to defend for what we all truly believe in. And then I also think about this book that I just was thinking of trying to read myself, called Collective Courage, A History of African American Cooperative Economic Thought and Practice, to really just gain more information about what have folks been doing. There's a lot of people in this country, a lot of communities in this country, a lot of Africans, revolutionary Africans in this country, really trying to establish a better future and presence for themselves and their future kin. And so really trying to find more sources for what has actually been happening and what has been successful. Like that video this morning that was truly inspiring, and I was like, wow, people actually see that there are folks around the globe that are actually making steps to make change for themselves. Maybe that will make a shift in people's perception of what's actually possible when we can name and show what is possible.
Yeah, I think I for those examples, especially bringing up the Black Panther Party, because a lot of times we think about the Black Panther Party, we think about guns, but it's important to understand that they did a lot more. The free breakfast program, to the health clinics, they did more and specifically addressed what was needed by the community, not just on some idealistic terms. I also think about examples today, like organizations, how what we see in Cuba, for example, what we see in Venezuela, in the communes. So we understand that even across the globe, African organizations are organizing in ways that we are trying to organize in Baltimore City today. So it's a lot of examples out there living like what we see with PACA, like what Black Alliance for Peace is trying to develop, of models of ways that we can develop to defend ourselves and one another. So at this time, we're gonna move on to the Q&A for the audience. So if y'all have any questions, I'll go ahead and pass around that mic.
I didn't really have a question. I was just saying what's up to my man.
You were talking about the Panthers, love the Panthers, and what was incredible about them that people have already mentioned is that they didn't just talk about this is why the system is messed up and what would be better. They combined it with this is what we're going to do to address it, right? Survival programs and things like that. So with regard to community defense, one of the first things that they did was do the cop patrols. I'm not saying that we should do exactly that, but I remember after the uprising, a lot more people, by default, when they saw the cops pull somebody over, would pull over and watch them, right? Like that was the vibe at the time. It wasn't like this or that organization was trying to get everybody to do it. People were just doing it. I would love to see the way that people are forming ICE watches now. Cop watches is necessary for Black folks in Baltimore. And it would be dope if that was coming together, I don't know who's doing it, if we could make it happen, but that's just something that comes to mind as a need that I'd be willing to talk to people about.
Could I just say, I know before, I can't recall which members this conversation was with, but we did speak about the innate feeling of needing to watch the police when we see that taking place. I do recall specific members. We were reading Blood in My Eye by George Jackson, and we were meeting to discuss it. And during that conversation, we all talked about if we're witnessing a police pull someone over, or just speaking to someone in public, especially an African, also being eyes to see what's going on. And I know very recently that was actually taking place. A lot of cop cars just like all around. And so around Pennsylvania and Pressman, so not too far from here actually. A lot was going on. There was like 6, 7 cop cars outside, and so I just like stood out and just was like observing. I didn't really know what I was doing, but I was like, I remember that conversation back in August. I said, if I see something, like I do want to feel more comfortable just like observing, watching, figuring things out. And so just like that comfort of watching the cops as well, I think that is something that many people also have to understand as well. So I like that idea.
I also just want to comment too real quick because I think that's a great point. And also, we know now, we've been informed in DC that we will be having the military occupation for sure extending throughout 2026, but now it's projected to stand through 2029, essentially. So we are seeing potentially 3 years of continued military occupation. Every metro station, on the corners, U Street, walking up and down, you know what I mean? And these are people who are not from DC, not even from the general area. A lot of people are country folks, you know what I mean? And so I bring up that because, this is a key time where we need to keep an eye out, for that violence, not just police, not just ICE, at the end of the day, they all kind of achieve the same tasks. They work for these same forces, you know what I mean? So I think that's a great point.
Yeah, the cup.
First, thanks for the work that y'all do. I'm curious just y'all's thoughts on technology as sort of organizing tools. I was recently reading an article about how tactics in Minneapolis where signal chats were being created and then deleted every single day, but thousands of people were joined on this one signal chat, and if you weren't specifically stating your purpose, you were immediately kicked out. And just curious whether we're sort of tapped into various tactics like that, and whether there's opportunities, especially with witness, everybody has a phone, and that phone footage has been such a crucial element, in recent years in keeping police accountable, at least to the public. Curious about that.
I mean, I think you in a way answered the question. I think, technology is important. It plays an important part in just our lives in 2026 in general. So that is going to be, stuff like signal chats, Zoom webinars, whether that's, so you're streaming political education, you're streaming some sort of meeting, just maintaining constant communication, with your comrades, with your community. We also live in an age too where we're getting flooded with information 24/7, and sometimes it becomes difficult to decipher the information. Not only the truth of some information, but what do we do in response to what I just seen? What do we do in response to the invasion of Venezuela? What do we do in response to the war in Iran? And so understanding how to decipher that sort of information, how to understand how you're going to combat, whatever you're witnessing, through organization, through, like you said, these signal chats, and then, filming your encounters, what you see with ICE, with police, and then spreading information, obviously. Spreading, if you find a really good source or really good information, you spread that with your friends, your family, your community. We need to all be on the same page if we're gonna make the difference that we need to make.
I don't think I'm the best person to talk about technology. I have a personal relationship with technology, is not always the best. But I do think it's important because it provides us opportunity to share, disseminate information. The only way we're receiving a lot of information nowadays is through some form of technology. I'm sure many of you are probably here because you saw the town hall flyer online. And so that in itself highlights the importance of tech. Communication through Signal, Slack, or whatever other app people use to kind of provide the information is also important. However, I do think it's just something to consider that the enemy, the state, has the ability to work around all of this technology that we have. They can delete messages, they can just remove YouTube channels or Instagram accounts. And so it should not be something that is solely relied on. Understanding of how to communicate with one another beyond that. How do we provide information beyond that? So in the event that technology maybe is not an option for a while or a long time, the organizing doesn't stop, the movement doesn't stop, the information doesn't stop. And so I do think that's something to consider when it comes to tech as well.
Peace, everybody. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Peace, everybody. I just have a quick question. So, a common strategy of empire to discourage revolution is to target some of the most vocal and militant oppositions, some of the most vocal militant opponents. So like more recently we've seen the assassination of the Ayatollah, the kidnapping of President Maduro, and then thinking of inside the U.S. in prisons, solitary confinement is often used to discourage uprisings inside the prison. So can you talk about how the targeting of revolutionary leaders fits within the conversation of community defense? So.
Ask the question,
How does the targeting of revolutionary leaders play a factor in community defense? Because the more vocal, outspoken people are very visible targets and face considerable repression.
I'm thinking two. I'm thinking two things. One, I think that fear, that concern really highlights the necessity of masses of people to be involved and engaged. Those situations are less likely to happen when it's all of us rather than a few of us. Someone can definitely shout it out and let me know, inform me, but I'm thinking about the recent imprisonment of the protesters because I believe one, definitely come let me know later, inform me, but one, was it? Yes, thank you, yes. And so I'm thinking about situations like that where it becomes so much easier for them to kind of hold us in when we're isolated. And so I think emphasizing to people that it really does require all of us to make something happen, to make things shake, that fear becomes less of a fear as a result of that. And so that's what I'm definitely thinking of.
I was thinking about that too, and I was gonna say something similar. That the revolutionary forces, organization is not an individual movement, right? It's a movement that involves the masses. It's all of us collectively, and that's why it's important for us to, worst case scenario, they do lock, a highly charismatic person up, and they, like Fred Hampton said, you can kill the revolutionary, you can't kill the revolution, you know what I mean? And so we need to be aware in tactics, you know, about even simple things like de-arresting. You know, if someone is targeted by police, by forces, what do we do, right? How do we defend that person, you know? And like Brother said, like we need everybody. We need the masses, right? You know, we need as many people as we can, because that is the best way of defending, you know, individuals, but also just defending the movement.
Thank you. Yeah.
So, in the theme of collaborative resistance, there is an opportunity to actually collaborate to form that resistance. We talk about how community safety should involve the community. What are some of the ways that you see are opportunities to involve communities outside of spaces like this? As you can see, it's a real intimate group today. But as you said, the work's going to continue because everybody's not in here. So where do we go with these projects, with these campaigns, with all of the movement? I said a word. With all of the movement that's taking place, how do we direct that and turn it into something that the people are a part of and not something that's taking place behind the scenes, and put that on Front Street?
I mean, you know, that's a great question, you know, and I think that the answer is to, you know, put these kind of programs, these kinds of campaigns within the community and then popularize them, right? Even if it means going door to door, right? Even like wheat pasting, standing outside the metro station for, you know, however long, you know, speaking on that part. You know, you might not get everyone to agree with you, but all you really need is a few people. You know, a few people who are like, you know, this sounds cool, I want to get on board. You know, and they tell their folks, they tell their kids, they tell whoever, you know, and we need to emphasize that, you know, like you said, this is not a movement happening behind the scenes or for a few selected people. No, this is for everybody, this is for us. And this is not only, you know, it's not only realistic, but it's absolutely necessary, you know, and the more we can get that, you know, across, I think the more people will hop on board, you know, and I've said it before, but it's through programs that, you know, getting people involved, that they're like, okay, you know, this is realistic.
I'm thinking like just plug it in where the people are. If that's a school, if that's a library, if that's, I'm trying to think of this, a church, like the people who are attending these spaces consistently, for whatever reason that may be where they are, have a discussion with them where they are, and then have an opportunity for them to then receive that information without coming to this behind the scenes thing or learning about the behind the scenes thing, and then learning information there. Being part of the space's normal hours. If we're thinking about trying to find places where people are, then it really is just like plugging in where they are throughout their day-to-day, how they're trying to survive, be there, and have those conversations at that moment.
Yeah, thank you for that. So with that, that's gonna conclude our Q&A session. Let's give a big round of applause for our panelists. Okay, and that takes us into our, we're gonna take a little quick discussion with the audience real quick. So I just wanna take a second before we move into our second part of the town hall, just to ask y'all a question. What do y'all consider to be the safest part of the city and why?
I think it depends on how you describe safety. Because I think safety for transplants, and like particularly white transplants, are going to be the L shape in what, I cannot remember the scholar's name, what is the black butterfly here in Baltimore? So it's the more gentrified areas. We're thinking Fells Point, Hamden, like all the places that like have murals and where there is a police presence, but it's not so obvious. But in reality, for like Black folks that have lived here for most of their lives. It's going to be the areas that they're the most familiar with, and they know that they aren't going to be immediately seen as criminal or unwanted. I think this sorry, I'm going to go on a bit of a tangent. I think this popped up usually with Fells Point. Like, they generally are a white area, and sometime in the pandemic there was a shooting, which is not common here in Baltimore, but when it happened in Fells, not all of them, but a lot of those small owners, business owners got together and like demanded Brandon Scott do something, as if they are not situated in Baltimore City, as if just because gun violence is now on their doorstep, it's something new or not common. So I think it depends on how you define safety. Personally, I don't feel unsafe in a lot of part of the city. I, as a femme-presenting person, mainly feel unsafe if I'm not with a group of people or if it's night and I'm out by myself. But apart from that, as long as I'm aware of my surroundings, I feel pretty at home in most parts of the city.
So I don't live that far from here. I actually walked here, and I'd say I feel really safe in my neighborhood. Sometimes I get packages delivered in my neighborhood, like, yo, don't do that, so on and so forth, because they trying to look out for me and stuff. And I actually got like robbed in Fayetteville. I've never been robbed in my neighborhood, so my neighborhood's where I feel safe at.
You want to repeat? What's the name?
Right here is Upton. So not here. I did not get robbed in Upton or Julia. I got robbed in Fayetteville. Yeah.
Similar to the presenting person who spoke first, I think it is relative, and I was actually part of a survey group that actually asked the question of like, where do you feel the most safe, where do you feel the least safe to Baltimore City residents, and most of them were like, I feel safest in my neighborhood because there is like a sense of belonging there, there's a level of comfort, like a shielding from like the rest of the city. And then you can ask them where they feel the least safe, and they'll say some other part of the neighborhood. I'm not gonna list the streets because it's their opinion. But I think safety is just where you feel comfortable and where you feel like people have your back. And also in that same survey, people will say, I mind my business, so I feel safe. So, yeah.
I'm just always taken by the degree to which that sort of like sense of security is psychological for people. I'll have people, I also live nearby, and I'll have people over who clearly make situations more dangerous for themselves simply because they're scared. Like they're paranoia or whatever, you know, and I'm not exclusively talking about anyone of any particular race or gender, but it's, yeah, sort of like revealing to me when I encounter people's sort of like psychology is like changing, you know, I was tabling with a comrade on Penn and North, and his particular response when a sort of like cop walked up to us kind of ended up in a like significantly more confrontational scenario than I would have ended up in, simply because in that case he was unwilling to sort of like take anything that the cop said anyway, it was just something where we ended up with 7 cops around us when it could have just been a one-on-one conversation, and it was very charged. And you know, the sort of example maybe is poor for what I was trying to say, but the the depth to which sort of like one's comfort level around other people sort of determines like how your interactions go, you know, like can make a space safe or unsafe pretty immediately.
Yeah, just to build off that a little bit more, I always tell my comrades, I tell my friends this, that safety, is purely from my perspective, is where your community resides. I don't think of it so much as a place. I think it more so resides in the people who you surround yourself with and the comrades that you surround yourself with. And just, you know, even for a little bit more context, like where I feel least safe a lot of times is actually the White L, knowing that historically all of the resources, all of the things that center people's needs and center, you know, what people traditionally think of safety as are really emphasizing these communities. And like, I tell everybody this, I went to Loyola, and the amount of transplants, and somebody mentioned it earlier, the amount of predominantly white transplants that come in from New Jersey, Long Island, Massachusetts, the Ivy League, East Coast, New England types, and the way that they'll come to Baltimore and they just have all these preconceived notions about safety and, oh, there's all this gun violence, there's all this and all these problems, but they're there for a few years and then they leave. And my experience through the whole thing, and particularly with the way that they basically demonized York Road, because York Road is historically one of the red lines within Baltimore City, and I got to learn a lot about the history behind that and just redlining in general. And I've walked up and down York Road so many times, and I think probably the worst thing that ever happened to me was I got catcalled. But, you know, again, I was more femme presenting at the time. So all that to say, I mean, I do think, and I appreciate that everybody has like that relative perspective coming with it, that ultimately, I just feel that safety resides more so in the people you surround yourself with, not necessarily a physical place, if that makes sense.
How you doing? I'm Josh. I think we've all said like community is really the place that you feel the safest. I'll say as a transplant, I'm from Louisiana, where the racial divide is literally one straight line, one street. And it determines how much opportunity non-white people and white people have in the home capital city of Louisiana, Baton Rouge. And so moving here, I think I just feel the safest where, like we said, our communities are, but also where there are people on the margins, the people who I've always been around. I'll definitely say for sure where I grew up, we're really focused on Black people, and so I feel the safest around other Black people. And again, like people who are on the margins, queer people, trans people, poor people, homeless people. These people are the people I see as the needing of the most human experience. And I think also that understanding of what my neighbors are, and seeing them as human, also adds another layer of safety. I don't feel the safest around a cop or anywhere where there are the most cops, because I don't see you as another one of, you know, us human beings. You have lost a lot of those privileges in my eyes. And so, yeah, I think I find safety and the safest place here in Baltimore where people like us are.
So I'm gonna preface this with like, I feel swears like bubbling up in me, and not as like a general blanket statement, but like probably as filler here and there. Is that okay if I just like let some F-bombs loose while I'm going through this? I'm genuinely asking, I'm sorry.
We in the church.
I'll calm it down, I'll do my darndest. So I have a sense of confidence that like borderlines on delusional when I'm walking around. So when I am like out and about, I don't feel very unsafe. I feel very secure in myself, and that sense of security like really deeply translates to how I interact with the rest of the world. Where I do feel unsafe, detrimentally, is in my vehicle. I cannot drive around in this city without some of the most insane parking endeavors, merging endeavors, just like crazy freaking speeding I've seen in my life. And here's the thing. I in that moment, I am fighting to not attribute it to the individual, because everybody, I hope most of us in this room would know, but I'm very willing to break it down, that car-centric urban planning, car-centric transport, it being the generalizable way of doing things in America is faulty and dehumanizing, and public transit needs to be much better invested into. But truly, I don't think there is anything that makes me feel more unsafe than driving Baltimore or parking anywhere, because it's predatory. It's really predatory, but that's my 2 cents.
They're really, oh my God, I didn't even.
Yeah, appreciate y'all for all y'all responses. I hope y'all was able to see like what are some things that make people feel safe and what is the reality of safety. You know, safety means so many different things to so many different people. So I appreciate that, and that really helps us in our prelude to our breakout group. So at this time, we're gonna transition into our second part. So we do have food, so we're just gonna take a few moments to get food and settle down, and then we're gonna split into our breakout groups. So we can start making our way out the sanctuary into the main room, and we'll have people to serve y'all.
Thank you.
Yep.
You know, we are 299 or 300 on the list of
Now we can have a conversation on like building the coalition.
What's number 1? That's what I'm trying to know. I bet that's how you should
It's probably that temptation.